Well, welcome back, everyone, to episode number 73's After Show, talking about DPS Warriors. We're talking about some things we missed in the main show, and I guess getting some design. Yeah, I can't speak. I'm done. All right, I'm done. Design philosophies of DPS Warrior. Yeah, it's pretty good. Alrighty, sitting down with Archimtiros, Sarri, and Dasima. We're talking about stuff and warriors and things, so we'll get right back into that. So, something you wanted to talk about at the end of the main show, Das, that we missed? What did you want to get into there, sir?
What did I want to get into? That was Archie.
Oh, it was Archie. Archie. Oh, yeah. Archie wanted to
get
into something.
Was like,
Archie had a good rant to go on.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess, all right, here's the time for it.
Oh, I've always got a good rant, but you know, one of the things I wanted to mention is that it's not all negative. I mean, Warriors have a lot to complain about right now, and it's not just because we want to complain about things. Every class can complain about things. Enhancement shamans have plenty to complain about, almost as much as we do. You know, I've heard people in Twitch chat, you know, some of the Rets got complaints that are similar to us. The thing is that a lot of times people get too stuck on numbers. Like, yeah, Ret may have a problem where a lot of its abilities do the same amount of damage, and you don't have a lot of difference between what button you hit, but at least you're hitting buttons. I consider damage and rotation, the flow of it, to be two very separate problems. Damage, you know, balance happens. It goes up and down. Last year in Siege of Orgrimmar, Warriors were absolutely on top. We were the kings of everything. This tier, we're on the bottom. It happens. Somebody is always the underdog. What I care a lot more about is making sure things work. You know, making sure that the rotation is fun to play. I want to enjoy playing a warrior. I've been playing one for over 10 years now. I mean, I love the class, but sometimes it's just frustrating, and right now it is. There's no real upside to it. I mean, it doesn't... And anybody can come up with a way that, you know, would fix warriors or fix fury or fix arms. There's a million of them, and I've come up with a few of them myself. A few of them have actually been implemented, like the 8-second enrage that we have now. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
But anybody can
Very nice change.
Yeah. But anybody can come up with ideas that work. You know, you go onto a forum and you can hit 100 of them.
Right.
The idea is to make things work without a whole bunch of crazy changes that completely changes the class. And that's definitely possible. So we just have to hope that good things are coming. It's not just about damage or how competitive you are. In my mind, it's about enjoying the game and having a spec that's fun to play, that works.
To an extent. I mean, like,
damage
even a bad class, if you're topping the meters, that means you're being brought to raids, so you're enjoying yourself. But at the same time, I mean, the flow of the spec really, really matters. Because like I said, Gladiator, fantastic spec. If Gladiator was viable and it could keep up with other specs, I'd be playing Gladiator right now. You know, not hands aside. Pain aside, I should say.
Yeah, you have no hands.
So, yeah, in terms of Fury right now, like, all they have to do is fix Bloodthirst. The Band-Aid that they gave it was an absolutely terrible Band-Aid. That was one of the worst concepts they could have possibly done for it. Because it doesn't guarantee that Bloodthirst will eventually crit. It just guarantees that... Well, it doesn't guarantee anything. It just gives it more crit, straight up. I mean, it's poor design. Archie, you mentioned the one design. If Bloodthirst doesn't crit, then have it the cooldown on it reset. Essentially, like Unquenchable Thirst, but not quite. And then you can replace that talent with an actual good talent in that tree. Because nobody uses Unquenchable Thirst. So
there's been a lot of suggestions as to what would fix it. And adding a flat amount of crit, which is what they did basically just because Collision suggested it. Go figure. Adding a base amount of crit is nice, and sure, it helps the average out, that we will just get more crits on average, but it doesn't really help the basis of the problem. The basis of the problem for Fury is that if Bloodthirst doesn't crit, you have nothing else to do, or nothing else you want to do because you're not enraged. So the solution to that In my opinion, the easiest solution is to bake in Unquenchable Thirst. If Bloodthirst doesn't crit, reset the cooldown. Simple. So you just, if Bloodthirst doesn't crit, you get to hit Bloodthirst again, like a slot machine. You just get to re-roll it. If it does crit, you move on to whatever else you had to do. Wild Striking, Raging Blow, Executes, whatever. You'll still have to deal with proc gameplay, so you might not be getting crits, but Blood Surge might proc, or you might cap out on Rage, so you'll want to go and spend that before going back to Bloodthirsting. But it keeps the spirit of the gameplay the same, without massively changing it, and it also has the added benefit that it would remove Unquenchable Thirst, and we could get a talent that can actually be competitive, since right now it will never be competitive. It simply can't be.
Right.
I think it's the best kind of change.
Well, it could be. It's just a matter of how little Bloodthirst does in terms of damage right now. The actual ability itself hits like a wet noodle, so...
Yeah. It is very underwhelming to press.
I mean, that's sort of... I have a similar situation right now. I mean, it's a little different in that regard. Enhancement is so balanced around AoE. And in a slight way, burst, I guess, because we have really high burst because we have so many damn cooldowns. Our single target is just abysmal. It's just terrible. I mean, our weapon enchants, which, are passive now, we don't have any interaction with them at all anymore. They don't do any damage. Wind Fury, for all its glory back in the day, hits for like sub 2,000. It just kind of like happens. Doesn't do anything. So we've been asking for quality of life fixes in that regard too. But you guys I don't have a lot of things to bitch about in the way the spec rolls. I think having Sanctity of Battle as an enhancement is stupid, personally, whatever. But yeah, there's definitely things to happen there. But your main ability as Fury, your main rotational, like... main fulcrum to do something, I lost the word there for a minute, is not
reliable.
It's not reliable. And then the rest of the spec that depends on this one ability happening, if it doesn't happen, you don't do anything. If it does, you can then cascade out of control.
It's kind of like Fireball for Fire Mages, but then Fire Mages have RNG protection.
They have RNG protection,
well,
exactly.
See, a lot of people suggested that, why don't you give them the Fire Mage treatment, where each time you cast Bloodthirst, if it doesn't crit, you get a stacking increasing chance to crit, like plus 10% chance to crit every time it doesn't. And that works on the surface. It's kind of the same as just adding a flat amount of crit. Like,
sure.
Eventually, the average is going to be that you get more crits. The problem is it only fixes half of the problem. Instead of fixing those spots where you won't get crits, you just end up getting a crit every 5th cast or something, guaranteed. But you still have to go through those first 3 or 4 where you have nothing to do. The better solution is like I said, to let you re-roll it. Because a Fire Mage that works, because if Firebolt doesn't crit, they can just recast Firebolt. We have a 4.5 second cooldown on Bloodthirst. So, Bloodthirst, didn't crit. Okay, I'll just sit here for a minute. Okay, Bloodthirst again, didn't crit. Well... maybe another 4 seconds.
Yeah, I know. And that just cannot be... You're not supposed to be like this even by the description of the class, but like this ferocious, dual-wielding, plate-bearing, like, barbarian gladiator. Ah! And then, like, if your main ability doesn't do anything for your interactions to start the roller coaster...
Yeah. Another one I've heard is... every time your Bloodthirst doesn't crit, your Berserker Rage cooldown got reduced by, say, 10 seconds. So you might not get...
something like that. Yeah, sorry. I'd suggested something like that back in the beta, and that works really well for, arms, where you're really only worried about getting in Rage for Colossus Smash on that 20-second window, but without Colossus Smash anymore for Fury, it's who cares?
This leads really well into Stoic's question he submitted, right? I don't usually do the QA cards during the main shows anymore. Again, if you submit a question through the Ask a Boss email, that is to help me build and make sure I touch on points during the main show to have integrated, right? I used to do QA cards. I kind of hold those for special occasions now. But Stoic asked, it's the subject, a serious question for Warriors this time. One of the goals in the pruning and simplifying that was made in Mr. Pandaria to Warlords was to make the classes more intuitive with less need for external guides. With warrior talents and stats now, do you think they succeeded or failed?
Does anybody else want to take this one, or should I?
This is
I think they failed miserably for arms, but for Fury, I think again the spec flows well. It's not so much whack-a-mole in the sense that you do have to think ahead in a lot of cases. So it is slightly intuitive. It's not, say, Warlock, but it's still not the easiest class to play because it does take decision making. You have to know exactly what you're doing and when. So, Archie?
Personally, I think it failed. I think the spirit was good. Like, the theory behind Fury is pretty good. It just doesn't work out because of the bad coefficients. You know, if we had reliable crit, Fury would work out pretty well. But it doesn't. The talents in particular really failed with Fury. We ended up with Stormbolt, which was a god in 5.4. You know, we loved that ability. And now it's nothing. I mean, it barely tickles a target. It doesn't even feel like you used it, and it just gets in the way of using other abilities. It's very similar in terms of damage to Dragon Roar, to the point where Dragon Roar is just better because it uses half the GCDs, and it always crits. You know, we've got the level 45, which is supposed to change the way we play. Sudden Death adds proc gameplay, and now that it's on RPPM, it's very useful. But Unquenchable Thirst just really doesn't do anything. I mean, even with very low amounts of crit, it just doesn't change our gameplay enough. It's still uncompetitive and it's still bad. With Furious Strikes, it reduces it, and it feels good when you have very low gear levels, but any amount of haste or crit just makes Furious Strikes a really bad talent to use. And then, of course, I already spoke earlier with Anger Management. Anger Management is a great concept. The execution is just poor, though, because an average casual player doesn't keep track of kill times. They don't keep track of fight lengths or how often ad intervals come out. They just look, is Bladestorm available? Yes or no. And they could have done a lot better at making things intuitive for new players. And then, of course, Arms Mastery is another one that I already soapboxed a little bit about, how it's not easy for players at all to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Talents specifically, they failed talents miserably. Like I was talking about this earlier, where the talents just don't do damage. Like even Bladestorm isn't that amazing. It's amazing in the sense that it's burst AoE, but they actually had the buff Bladestorm because just Whirlwinding was better than Bladestorm on the beta, which was an just terrifying, knowing that, I don't know, the iconic ability for warriors wasn't even worth taking. But in terms of like the actual damaging abilities, Stormbolt, Shockwave, Dragon Roar, Siegebreaker until this patch, Ravager got nerfed to shit, obviously, so it falls into this category where it's almost just not even worth casting. It's worth it for the GCD, but its damage is so underwhelming overall. Stormbolt is like 3% of your damage if you're lucky at the end of a fight, which to me, it's like, for an actual talent, you're barely losing any damage if you said, hey, I don't feel like using this ability. If you felt like using a Raging Blow over a Stormbolt, the amount of damage you're losing is just almost non-existent.
All right, Sarri, your turn. Both of these guys just talked for a while. They are kind of doing a little thing with the arm stuff. What do you think?
No, I'm used to this. I play arms, so I'm used to not doing anything.
You're used to it. Oh, wow.
Like, I can usually tab out and change my music in between my attacks.
Wow. But no, so what do you think? The design philosophy?
Whirlwind
spam. Yeah.
Like, I whirlwinded more than the helicopter does.
It's really miserable when you can't even use Slam. Your main ability that you're spamming for 95% of the fight is an AoE ability that hits like just not like a wet noodle because like a bloodthirst, a wet noodle, but it hits relatively small in terms of the actual damage output.
Like, a lot of the complaints about Warriors would be fixed if Slam was made baseline. It would do the exact same thing as Whirlwind, but it's a single target attack.
Yes.
And that makes sense to use on single target fights.
It used to be. Didn't they had design philosophy, I don't know if it was in Cataclysm or in early Mists of Pandaria, where the design philosophy that Blizzard didn't like people using AoE on single target, mostly because
of how... That was Cataclysm.
So because it was propagated by Ret Paladins using Glitterstorm on single target for a DPS increase. They're like, we don't like this.
I think it was more Warriors' fault.
It could have been a little bit of both.
Honest.
It could have been a little bit of both. But that they have totally flip-flopped on that completely now, especially with Arms Warrior, where, and in the same sense, Ret Paladin now, where your AoE abilities are single target.
Well, it was all about the ability pruning. Like,
yeah,
why have Slam when you can just hit Whirlwind? But for people who don't want to hit as many buttons, so instead of having Slam and Whirlwind, why not just put talent or Slam as a talent and then give other people Taste for Blood? Like that was actually their philosophy. If you don't want to hit as many buttons, then you're not going to take Slam. You're going to take Taste for Blood, or if you want a random proc, you're going to take Sudden Death. Like that was their actual philosophy. That is what I was told.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, that's still a poor philosophy. I don't know. I really liked Slam originally. Like people were using a lot. It was just the design of it and how they went about it was really poor. I liked the idea that you could have the stacking buff, but having it drop off after one GCD was an absolute dumb idea in my opinion. It should definitely last for 2 GCDs. So the idea would be to stack it up right before your CS, and then Colossus Smash, Mortal Strike, and then drop a ton of 2-stack slams into the CS to actually maximize your damage, which is kind of like how the old Fury was. But because they screwed up the actual rage generation and they screwed up how Slam actually works, it just kind of completely flopped into the piss poor spec that it is right now.
Yeah, I'm just not sure how it works, because the ability pruning is very different across the board, and Blizzard has openly admitted the fact that like certain classes had great ability pruning, certain classes didn't. Like, again, back to me, I lost 2 buttons and I gained 2 buttons and nothing else changed, and my buttons are just faster now. That's it. That is all that happened to me.
Arms went from 88 APM to 40.
Yeah, Arms was
on a good day.
Destroyed. So it's a weird swing on what classes like got most affected. And that's why I would bring it up at the beginning of every show. So I don't...
Not even building off what Dasima said, and it's not really so much about ability pruning as about talents and enabling a spec. I've been saying it for a while that talents should enhance a spec. They shouldn't enable it.
Right, yep.
Arms is built as this cleave spec, but it absolutely doesn't function unless you use Taste for Blood. You have to use that talent to get enough rage to actually do anything. You know, Fury pretty much revolves around using Sudden Death to actually be any good. And I don't know, it feels like they marginalized so many talents, but then they made other talents so incredibly powerful that you have to use them.
Right.
Otherwise, it doesn't... Like Bladestorm. Bladestorm is the defining feature of the class. And they've said in multiple interviews, well, the Warrior's really strong when it Bladestorms something, but then you'll average out in the end. They literally design our class around being able to Bladestorm. And it's probably, despite it being the best part of our class, it's also the worst problem with our class.
Because you're pigeonholed.
Yeah, and if we don't Bladestorm or we can't Bladestorm for some reason, we're useless.
Yep.
Avatar is nice, Bloodbath's nice, but they pale in comparison to what Bladestorm can do.
Yeah, it's awkward.
Well, the only thing is, as well, if you have Bladestorm as baseline, that bumps Bladestorm's damage up even more, because then you're bloodbathing while Bladestorming, or you have Avatar up while Bladestorming.
Well, I don't even know. I wouldn't even say it should be baseline, but they need to make the other talents equally as attractive, you know? And they aren't.
Right, but it's actually impossible to make Bloodbath and Avatar attractive on AoE specifically.
I know, and that's just how the talents are structured is very poor. They should have been like Ravager, Bladestorm, and I don't know, Shockwave.
That wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, something.
Have Siegebreaker replace Shockwave.
Because
Siegebreaker, it does have its niche in the sense that it's not really for PvE, it's for PvP. Granted, it's a really stupid talent unless you're punting gnomes off Lumbermill or something in terms of RBGs, but that's the only
damage if you're a Tauren.
But that's the only time it's like ever really a good talent. So
yeah. Or maybe Dragon War Ravager and Bladestorm. You know, that actually would be a really good lineup, because you could have they're all 1 minute.
Not without a massive Dragon War buff.
Well, yeah, obviously you would, but you've got the instant one hit with Dragon Roar. You've got the
even then, because then
with the
PvP
other
happens.
two.
So it all comes down to PvP. If something
Yeah.
is too OP in PvP, they refuse to actually break it apart unless it's another class other than Warrior.
Yeah.
Because they just did Chimera Shot, but would they do Execute? No, they're just gonna nerf Execute.
Yep.
Even though Arms is like not even that good on single target,
Arms,
unless you're Sarri with good RNG.
Yeah,
yeah, of course. Like Arms makes sense. I don't have anything against the design philosophy. Like they want to slow hard-hitting spec, sure, fine. Then design a freaking spec that actually works like that, and don't nerf it when it works like that. Like Execute is supposed to hit hard, but then it hits too hard in PvP.
Yep.
It doesn't even necessarily work like that at this point. It's like they nerfed the shit out of Mortal Strike. It started out hitting so hard at the start of beta, and then they just like halved its damage to something that was just miserable. And the only time you can actually see a huge Mortal Strike is when you get a mastery proc in your opener, so you see Mortal Strike, and you see this like 175k Mortal Strike. But that's it. Like outside of that, Mortal Strike does not hit hard. It does like as much damage as a Raging Blow does.
Yeah. That's a weird thing right now, and we talked about that before in the show setup, which we didn't want to bring up in the main show and the harping on the whole PvP, PvE, like back and forth. But I personally think that for the betterment of the game's health, that all spells and abilities need to have 2 rule sets going into World of Warcraft, going into 7.0, because they need to stop this PvP and PvE power struggle. Because some classes get really crushed because of it, and others don't get touched. I mean,
cough Arms.
Well, I'm going to say warriors in general, Arms Warrior for PvP, but then like rogues are always in the same battle where they're battling with their what does what, and can this be awesome for PvP? If it is going to get nerfed, we can't do it. All this like interacting crap. But if everything just had a versus players and versus enemies, because so many things do, but so many things in the same sense don't. And that's really weird that some of them do, but some of them don't. Like, why don't they just have them all or none?
Yeah.
First spell they ever.
For a long time.
I mean, even some is just fine. Like, you don't have to completely split it. But you can't nerf something specifically because of PvE or because of PvP and not compensate the PvE aspect of it. Or, you know, by buffing another ability.
Sure.
And like the first spell they ever split for PvP and PvE was Claw to Smash. Because frankly, 100% armor reduction on players is quite OP.
Well, sure.
So they fixed that. And it was the first ever spell. And then people got happy at finally gonna split them, and then they did nothing more. And then they fixed most other classes, like CC they fixed quite fast, and then now Chimera Shot, etc, etc. But they still don't fix the one outliner that is always either OP in PvP or brokenly bad in PvE.
Yeah.
Which is Arms.
Well, no, see, so yeah, MC brings up that Blizzard have actually said they don't want to split PvP because it damages spells. It would be too complicated for new players. All right. What's complicated for new players, and this is gonna be a host soapbox real quick. What's complicated for other players is that they remove abilities from your spell book that now you don't know where certain damage comes from, and they don't have a toggle for advanced spell book or not, so you don't know like what is going on behind the scenes. That to me is more complicated. And if abilities all had a versus player or versus enemy, that would be very simple, because you know if you attack a player character, it does X, Y, and Z, or if you attack a raid boss or a PvE mob, it does X, Y, Z. How is that more complicated? That just tells you exactly what it does.
And the thing is, most players wouldn't even notice the damage coefficient changing. Most players completely ignore that because the tooltips don't even really reflect it properly anymore.
Tooltips also lie.
Yeah. I mean, really, the only time it would really possibly confuse people is what they already have. Like Colossus Smash reduces armor by 100%. Oh wait, if you use against a player, it's what, 40%? And the tooltip doesn't say that anywhere.
Nope.
So that's where it gets confusing.
Yeah.
That's where it gets confusing.
The tooltip just says less. So, like, how much less? Is it a lot less? The Colossal Smash right now reads, smashes a target for 100% of weapon damage, physical damage, and causes your attacks to bypass all of their armor for 6 seconds. Bypasses less armor on players. How much less?
Honestly, you just take tooltips with a grain of salt. Like, they don't even update tooltips at the time.
Well, that's the thing. What people
like this expansion, they've thrown in so many hot fixes on classes, but the tooltips don't come until the next patch. So, like, you're sitting like they buffed Thunderclap
and 3 hot fixes later.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there looking at the tooltip. I'm like, this is not more damage than Whirlwind at all. And then, like, I had to go about and I had to figure out that, they didn't buff the tooltip, so they didn't change it to actually or update rather.
Yeah.
And then they see data mine the information and say, "Oh, X could get buffed." No, never mind. That's just a tooltip fix.
Yeah, that's the worst. Like you read that and then you're like,
get happy.
Buffs, they're doing something right. And
the ability pruning and making classes more simplified so that they could increase the amount of boss intricacy was their goal. But then if they have this lax fall off with like the tooltip issue, so you don't actually know what the hell your abilities do, that's what's more complicated. I mean, Archie's like jumping away from me. That's what's more complicated. Not the fact that they took away and hid things in the spellbook. That to me is more frustrating because now you don't know where certain things are coming from. The biggest point in that is Frost DKs. They buffed Icy Talons to what? You have to like dig on a database on WowDB or Wowhead to find out what it got changed to.
I mean, you don't even have half your things in the spellbook anymore. Mastery isn't even in the spellbook anymore. You have to go to the character sheet.
Yeah, why they do that? That to me is more complicated.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
They have a lot of hidden stuff.
Yeah,
like,
they have
for
a lot,
example,
Yeah.
Like for rogues, when I initially started playing my rogue at the start of this expansion, I'm like, where is Find Weakness? I cannot find this ability to actually know I have it.
Yep.
And I'm like sitting there looking like through the spellbook, where is it that it says that it's connected to ambush? And then I realize it's actually on the ambush tooltip.
Yep. But
it wasn't even clear. I should say that.
That is more complicated to me. I liked when every single thing was illustrated out in your spellbook.
Advanced tooltip log.
Then you could find
spellbook log.
Yeah. Then you could find what the hell your class does. So that's my weirdest thing. Their simplification in certain points actually made the game more complicated and frustrating.
Yeah, especially when they have an option for advanced tooltips.
Yeah.
Like without that option, it says close smash makes you deal more damage.
Yeah, I don't know why. Like they thought it was too big of a deal, and their spellbook now is beautiful. Like the new spellbook from like where if you look up the old screenshots of the old spellbook, chat room please, the new spellbook looks great. But it only has like 2 pages of stuff in it. Fill that thing up, man.
There's one glaring problem with the spellbook. There's no search function.
Ooh.
That just makes me angry. I sit there and I look for an ability through the spellbook, and I just cannot find it. It's a pain in the ass. It's like they already have it in for like void storage and the bank and your actual bag. So why is it not in for the spellbook?
Yep.
You play ARMS and you have 1 page.
Yeah, exactly. You have 1 page. Yep, exactly. So I was to talk about the rotational elements for different openers and stuff, but we're out of time really. So what I think I might do is I might include a section of the show notes as a shareable document in the episode. So you can just click to see the episode notes. People have kept asking me to actually just keep sharing the show notes via like social media and whatever. So we'll go through that. We'll see if that's a thing. Anything else that you want to go through Warrior stuff wise? I mean, I can bring up, heroicstrike.org again on the screen real quick. Moment of silence.
I mean, we could talk forever about Warrior stuff. There'd be no end to it.
I think that right. Go
ahead. Everything that we've said months ago is still valid, and I mean, we all love the class. It's why we're here, even if we occasionally go trader and play a rogue, but we still love the class, and we want to see it get better. I mean, It's not just the top end raiders that are upset with this. It's not the 1%ers. You go on any of the forums, and it is massively everybody dislikes how Warriors are right now. They want to see it get better, and hopefully it can be a little bit of a wake-up call that the developers are out of touch with what we want. That doesn't mean their ideas are necessarily bad. It's just not what we want. Correct. And at the end of the day, any designer of anything designs something for the user. And if you forget that, your design is flawed.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you're building a chair or you're building a house or you're building a game. You build it for your target audience.
Yeah. And that's not because people like this stream is so full of salt. It's not because full of salt. It's because we are passionate about this becoming, and we're voicing our opinion to get it better.
Well, we are salty as well.
Well, yeah, you know, as Archie's always a little bit, yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to not be salty. Like, after your Bloodthirst just doesn't crit 3-4 times in a row, and you just watch your damage just plummet. And it's like, I was doing so goddamn well, and then I didn't sacrifice my neighbor's cat, so now I'm doing crap. It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least he's still sacrificing animals.
Right, yeah, I was a comment in chat when you talked about that earlier, Des, that like someone ran out of wildlife nearby.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah.
Eventually, he's gonna be making human sacrifices next tier.
Well, so he can get invited to raid. Bunnies or something.
Put it this way: there's the reason why I'm forced to live on an island.
Are you? Yeah. Your bloodshed would just spread. That's pretty good. Well, gentlemen, I think we're good to go on that. Of course, you can hit the button and find these people online other places. Of course, everything you need to know about FinalBossTV, all of our past episodes and whatnots are on the website, which is currently being revamped. It's looking mighty good in the back end right now. You'll see that hopefully by, like, April. Maybe. I don't know. I don't like giving promises because I'm really busy with stuff. Again, our warriors today, WarriorSarri. You can go watch him on twitch.tv at WarriorSarri or find him on Twitter at the same name. Thank you, sir, for being on the show again.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes, very nice. We had the salty Archimtiros right there. He's on Twitter at Archimtiros. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And then we had Dasima joining us today from Midwinter. He's on twitch.tv at Dasima with an H at the end. Thank you, sir. Also on Twitter as well without the H.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Got a little ranty, but some of these classes have much to discuss. Check the show notes to hopefully be logged into the after show link description box on YouTube. If you missed the main show, of course, it'll be up on YouTube tomorrow with all of its glory and all of its extra information in there. Moment of silence, of course, for heroicstrike.org. And then we'll see you all next week again for Brewmaster Monks. More information on that on social media, Twitter, and Facebook on who our guests will be for Brewmaster Monks. And until next week, guys, have a great week. Trust in your seal of tempered fate. And bye-bye.
Bye.
Look at the... Archie, say goodbye.
Bye.
Terrible.
See you, everybody.